This lady in the middle just blew me. I asked her a question, how many companies have you evaluated in your life? She threw a number saying, yeah, 10,000 or so. 10,000 companies. And this guy, I think he walks around with 8 suparis on his head. So, you know, I think this deserves a slightly bigger panel. Come on, guys, put it together. Okay, so let's go with this. This session is how gaming can contribute to the 1 trillion, several trillion now economy. How can it make India a bigger, more prominent player in the whole world? Your data, Salome, $3.8 billion size today, right? And that's not a small thing. It's the 5th largest part of the Indian media and entertainment segment. And for something that started seemingly just the other day, it's really grown very quickly out there. 450 to 480 million, depending on whose numbers you estimate, gamers, right? When I mentioned this to Secretary Jaju the other day, he said, Ashish, are you telling me 1 in 3 people in India play games? He couldn't believe it. And I'm like, yes, that's what all the data seems to be showing. At least in a year, 1 in 3 people are playing games, right? If you look at the last 10 years, this is the fastest growing part of the Indian media and entertainment sector. There is not a single thing growing faster, and that includes digital media, it includes OTT platforms, it includes all that stuff. Still, gaming is growing. So yes, it does have, it has shown a lot of growth potential. And the question, my first question, and Rohan, I'm going to start with you, is that we've seen this growth happen. There's been a lot of trends. We've all heard the story, right? Low data, smartphones growing to 55 crores, all of that stuff. Will this continue? What's going to keep this growth going?
Yeah, so I think it will continue because we are seeing the numbers that you mentioned, gamers. About 75% of that are from tier 2 and 3 towns. Wow. So that expansion is happening. As a entertainment destination, I think gaming is right up there as a destination choice for gamers and users. So that is not going to change. I think clearly the number suggests that it's going to be, I think this year, 500 million gamers. So that I think is going to be intact. Within the media and entertainment landscape, I don't think gaming is going to change.
You're basically saying that we've still not reached our potential on gamers, and this can grow. Where would you see this number of gamers, Roland, in say 3 years, 5 years from now? Where will be our peak? Is there a peak? I don't know, Salome, you want to take that because you do all the deals, you have all the future projections.
Yeah, you know, I think let's put this number in context, right? Like people keep wondering about what this number is, why, and forget the math of it, forget the enormity of the number. Go on the airport, like take a look around. What do you see people doing when they're waiting? They're either watching video content or they're playing games, or you sit on a flight. I just came back yesterday from meetings, and you know, I walked down the aisle, and in every aisle I saw at least one person on their phone playing a game. So, you know, this is not just numbers, it is actual live truth. But if you were to try and understand the psychology of it, is why is it so popular? Because the value per price proposition for gaming is very high, right? India is a country where you have 6 cinema screens for 1 million people. Physical infrastructure doesn't exist. You don't have great quality of life outside. So where are people going to spend their entertainment time? And we've now moved from family screens to your personalized mobile screen.
Escapism.
Not just escapism, but it's entertainment, right? When was the last time you as a family sat and watched a show collectively? When was the last time collectively? All the kids, exactly, right? Everybody's in their own rooms watching their own personalized entertainment on their mobile screen. Now, we can argue with that, but the reality is it's not changing. We're at the precipice of a time when we're moving from the physical world into the digital world. You have 50% of India's internet population is under 25. They've grown up on mobile phones. They are digital natives. They're touch first. So if you expect this behavior to change, I'm saying you're living in the old age. right? The new age of media is not just gaming. It's actually interactive, it is personalized, it is immersive, and it's deeply participatory.
I'm going to put you in the spot with a horrible question that we didn't prep for.
Okay, sure, go for it.
TV has a reach of 830 million Indians.
Sure.
Will gaming get there?
Absolutely, 100%.
By when?
There's no doubt about it. I'd say in the next 5 years.
Wow, that's a big thing.
But gaming is already bigger than cricket revenues. It's already bigger than box office revenues. A box office last year, footfalls declined from 930 odd something footfalls down to 880. It's actually declined. Gaming, on the other hand, actually grew 20% in terms of number of gamers. It's growing at double-digit growth rates. Now, everybody understands compounded annual growth rates. I don't have to explain that. But you can just see where that trajectory goes. So 100%.
Wow, I'm shocked. Meghna, key trends you're seeing that will continue to drive this growth into the future?
Right. So we did a study a couple of years ago where we looked at had survey data we took a survey of 2,000 users across India, and we also looked at app data for 20 lakh users. And what we found are some interesting things. You know, gaming is often painted with a kind of broad brush, but it encompasses so many different types of engagement. And gamification really spans the gamut of sectors. So, for instance, research has found that it's had huge benefits in health and education, in like motivating people to stick with their regimen, which is beneficial for both the patient as well as the doctor, the healthcare provider. And similarly, in education, it's helped with knowledge retention, etc. And the thing is that when we kind of, as Sir was indicating that, excessive gaming, what if someone is kind of compulsively using a game to improve some kind of skill, which we found that a lot of users do. So a lot of users go to game or go to kind of gaming for upskilling, for knowledge development, for improving motor skills and things like that. I think it's important to understand these nuances when you're looking at a sector, not kind of paint it with a broad brush.
But, so we do a lot of these interactive games, right? Now, when we launched the KBC Play Along game, which is a knowledge-based game, we got a massive uptake. In that season, it was 32 million people who played the game, uniques. But when we did it on IPL, which was a predictive game, right, which is saying how many runs will be scored in the next over, how many wickets will fall in the next over, that got over 100 million uniques over one season. So where do you see what's going to be really driving the growth? Is it going to be the hardcore knowledge-based games, or is it going to be the other kind of games, the predictive stuff and the more entertainment stuff?
I don't think it's a zero-sum game between these. I know often things in the attention economy are presented as, kind of negating each other, where if one is doing well, the other is not. But I think it's a combination of things. So I think that, yes, real money gaming is successful because it is entertaining. It is a way not only to interact with a sport that you enjoy, but also to interact with your friends. So, for instance, I did my undergrad in the US and I played college golf for the US. Now, college basketball and college football over there is huge for fantasy sports. People start, we have this thing in college basketball in America called March Madness. So people start filling their brackets way in advance, like as early as it's in March, but it starts in like early December that people start filling their brackets. And it's a huge revenue generator for universities. Like our university, for instance, my university of Kansas, we won the NCAAs when my freshman year, and we won the Big 12. They made about $1 billion. A lot of the money came from these fantasy sports, and it all then feeds into, the not only basketball and football as sports in the college, but also other sports as well. And our college constantly lost players to the NBA. So it's like feeding an entire ecosystem. It shouldn't only be seen as, it's a handful of companies profiteering. It's feeding an entire ecosystem. So I think that when you're thinking about any kind of thing, particularly in the digital realm, you have to think about it from a systems perspective. You can't think about it as an isolated activity or engagement.
Very, very valid point. And, going for that, I'm coming to this with you only, Roland. Fantasy sport, it's linked to sport, right? As a nation, we are crazy about fantasy sports, cricket, and, even kabaddi, I'm sure. But something like Ludo, which doesn't have that passionate underbelly, so to speak, of sports, that's been growing at a bizarre pace over the last few years. What's driving that? And again, will that continue?
Yeah, so, taking that topic forward. So, just before I answer that on Ludo, so taking forward what the ladies just mentioned, that we are seeing that, the game mechanics in everyday things like, for example, spin the wheel in e-com or in predictive, as you mentioned. Now, these, if you see the numbers, they are about 100 million. So these are all things that are going to add to the growth that I was mentioning earlier. Another area that I see is the intersection of gaming and sport tech that you're mentioning about fantasy, which is leading the way there. So these are also a couple of things. I'm just trying to add to what they already said.
Valid
but
point.
Coming back to your question on Ludo, yeah. So the skill format Ludo is being offered right now. Some innovative formats are being offered traditionally, and since I represent the industry from the federation perspective, all these years fantasy, poker, and rummy, the card games, and now we are seeing the skill format of Ludo also emerging as a pre-approved game of skill. And then, as we speak, there are so many formats, but there is a process that needs to be followed for it to qualify. There could be skill element, but it needs to, and right now we have a algo-based framework that is being used to test games of skill, but we can talk about that later. I'm sure it's not covered in this $1 trillion economy subject.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just going to go down. So we've got, our estimates as EY, not very accurate because tough to get all the data, is that the industry today directly employs about 1.5 lakh people or so. I don't know where you stand with that.
What is 2.5 lakh people?
2.5 lakh. Okay, great. 2.5 lakh people. That's pretty big, right? TV as an industry is about 5 lakh people today. So it's a lot of employment. Do you see this going up? What are the kind of jobs and roles that are coming out right now? Roland, let's start with you.
So let's look at it just from, the checklist when a new gaming company, let's say, wants to become a member of the edge. There's some 15, 20 checklists. So there's so many things, and we, at the center of, working with people like Saloni, the investor-led interests. Then there are the enablers, which are especially the payments service providers, banks, and payment gateways. Look at big tech, where, as Google and Meta opening up for gaming companies. Look at affiliates who support marketing. Look at all of these indirect jobs. When we onboard, there are about at least 20 checks that we need to do, whether they, before we onboard them. So that itself gives you an indication of, so many ancillary businesses that support a gaming company when it comes into business. And then there's game development, which you all know. There's an esports. There is so many, all elements that a normal media company would employ, from marketing to live streaming and so the skill sets, and also as she mentioned, the upskilling part of it. So even in edu training, if you look at the entire, there's so many direct industries that are involved, and then indirect also. So I think this is only going to grow from here on. There's a PwC study which says about, sorry, PwC, but
it's fine.
But it's like, it's going to increase to double that number in the next 3 to 4 years. Yeah.
Saloni, you're a, what do I call, serial investor, if I may call you that. 1,900 game development studios in India, 100 of them at reasonable scale. Do you see this changing? What's the future of game dev in India?
We've evaluated over 3,000, so those are the, we've looked at 3,000 companies over the last 5 years. So look, there are two trends, right? One is where whenever you see a industry achieve capital, capability, regulatory, mainstream attention, you start to see talent migrate from other industries and move into that particular industry, right? Anywhere where you have seen the emergence of very strong telco talent, very strong engineering talent, it has only been natural that gaming as an industry evolves. We've seen this in China, we've seen this in Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, Finland, Europe. I can give you multiple examples, right? That obviously exists in the India market. Now, if you would have asked me this question about a decade back, that was obviously not the case because the digital infrastructure building of the economy was being laid out, right? You needed e-commerce platforms, you needed payment platforms, you needed travel platforms, right? Gaming was not the first thing that was going to be built by the engineers and solved for. We now start to see that kind of experienced product managers, experienced tech leads, back-end guys, data guys now saying, hey, let's move to where is the next big sunrise sector, right? Because eventually this is talent which is going to take on the next big challenge. Also, a decade ago, the likes of a Zynga, an Electronic Arts, a Ubisoft, a GSN set up shop in India, right? Where they were running back offices. But over a course of a decade, now you have very experienced talent which has been trained on best-in-class live ops, best-in-class production, who are now saying, hey, I've managed P&Ls anywhere between $50 to $100 million. Now I'd like to come out and build value for my own self.
So in a global economy of 200 billion plus on
Sure.
the kind of games we are talking about,
Yeah.
why is our global game development share so crappy?
Because we're a 4-year-old industry in its institutional journey. It's very simple as that.
Where do you see us in a steady state? How
Well,
relevant will we be?
Let me answer that question a little bit differently, right? Pre-1990s, we only had state television. Satellite happened. The only content that got beamed into our homes was American television. Everybody said, hey, we're exporting content, but we all grew up watching Bold and the Beautiful and Santa Barbara and Beverly Hills. It took about 5-6 years for domestic production houses to emerge. SL came, Z came, Balaji came, and we got first mass market, privately owned television where you got Hum Panch and all of that. But today, if you look at the entertainment palette in India, for every White Lotus and Squid Game, you have a Panchayat and a Family Man. So one has to understand the comparisons that we are making, right? If you're comparing a 4-year-old industry to industries where gaming has been entrenched for nearly 3 decades, like the US or Japan or Korea, that comparison is not relevant.
Fair point.
Right? So when we talk about talent, talent has to emerge, from existing setups, but talent also has to be incubated, right? We were at Waves. Blumikai was the only VC fund on the Waves subcommittee, and one of the key initiatives that came out from the Waves was the setup of launch of the Indian Creative Institute, right, which is being done with Meta and Google and Adobe and Microsoft. That's a great way of incubating talent and training them on game design and data analysis and just creative industries. So all of this is starting to come together, but we need some level of institutional conviction and also some level of patience.
Because I'm saying even if we just get 5% of that global market in game dev, that's $5 billion.
You know, in 2007, China was $1.1 billion of just global, was $1.1 billion overall as gaming. By 2015, 2016, it had contributed and gone up to about $13 billion. So there has to be some...
Is India going to get there?
Our estimates are in the next 4-5 years, we get to 9.2 billion.
Touch wood. I hope that happens. From your point of view, I've got a slightly different question for you.
I just wanted to respond to your earlier question where you said that, prediction games saw so much more uptake than education games. Slightly lower barrier to entry there, right? Because with an education game, you have to have a certain degree of knowledge to start engaging with that game. Whereas, things related to fantasy sports, everyone enjoys sports. Watching sports on TV, way more accessible, right? And something that a wider range of people engage with. So just responding to that there. Just on Saloni's point, TV did really well in the 90s, and I think we had some great potential, not only for mass market, but really some innovative programming. And then the TRAI came in 2004 and kind of slammed that sector, right? And that's been the story for the last 20 years, where we have 850 million or TV homes, but there is, I mean, it's dying essentially, a slow death,
It's
because
coming down 6 to 8 million a year.
yeah, because it's just not able to recuperate investment because of the TRAI, and that is it. I mean, if you're talking about the future of any industry in this country, you have to think about it coterminously with regulation, and is regulation going to kill it?
Wow. Okay, last question. We're out of time. I'm giving each of you guys 1,000 crores to invest with a specific ask. Roland, for you, if I give you 1,000 crores, would you put it into game dev or game publishing?
Game dev.
Why?
I think there is a lot. I mean, one may ask that, you know, why isn't India producing a AAA game? I know there are some people who are working on it, and it's work in progress, but I'm really hopeful
And the
that
AAA game. Salome, quickly for you. Casual, RMG.
We do across the board. We already have the capital, so thank you. But as a VC fund, we invest across the interactive media landscape. So we do digital content, we'll do game studios,
So
we
you're
do
going to spread it
platforms,
out.
we do tool tech infrastructure, we run a portfolio, and we've done game devs, we've done, you know, platforms, social entertainment platforms, we've done ed tech, kids education, kids entertainment. So we've done it.
Okay, last question for the day. Meghna, education-based games or kid casual games?
Well, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act is going to kill kids' casual games because it prohibits stuff. It does. It will.
And in a fair.
I mean, yeah, no, because it prohibits any kind of targeted ads to kids.
Of children, yeah.
And we've already seen a live example of this when Google banned targeted ads on its App Store. It saw substantial app abandonment amongst kids' games. That's what's going to happen here. Similar with YouTube, it had to implement a decree related to kids' content, where it basically couldn't target kids. Made for kids content went way down. The production and dissemination of it went way down after that. So if you introduce these kinds of blanket, non-nuanced measures, you're going to see really adverse, unintended consequences. So,
Got it.
I mean, I would say education has more scope because it's not only targeted at
Okay,
kids.
we're out of time. I think
just
Roland
one,
wants to
yeah,
make
one
a
point. For all this to happen, I think from where we currently are, we talked about gamer numbers, but on the size of the industry from 3 billion to 7, at least 7, doubling in the next 5 years. But we need clear, balanced regulation, because some people are in the room who are capable of doing that. And like Sir said, we should also crack down on the offshore, which is, you know, which is a
I think
deterrent to the industry.
that offshore is crazy. And if you...
Just one thing on responsible gaming,
Yeah.
since I think you...
We're up on time.
I know, but just 1 minute. I think that, you know, first we need to kind of contextualize digital entertainment and where gaming stands. So again, in our study, we found that while social media, 89% of the users we saw social media had daily active engagement, it was far lower for gaming. And even in terms of money spent, it's about 200 to 400 rupees a month on OTT, but about 100 rupees on average on gaming. And real money gaming is a even smaller segment of that, somewhere between 5%.
Okay.
So I think that is one important consideration. The other important consideration, because gaming, as Sir indicated, is often spoken about in the context of public health. But what I want to ask, and is a question back to the state and to parents, is that what is really being done to afford better public health outcomes? Because, for instance, if you restrict screen time, you know, empirically it shows, empirically it's been shown that it has absolutely no benefits for anyone. It's also, I mean, and also the other consideration is that in this country, many cities, you can't go out. Either public parks, you have to pay to enter them. So, you know, they're limited scope for outdoor activity. In Delhi, we can't go out most of the months of the year, either because of the weather, and it's polluted basically throughout the year. In the winter, it's much worse. Yeah, so in terms of public health, if we're going to talk about public health, I think we need to consider these larger kinds of dimensions instead of focusing on platforms. Yeah.
It could be a whole different discussion. Thank you very much,
Thanks, Ashish.
all of you.
I'll
Lovely
get
to
to
have
catch my
you.
flight. Thank you so much.
And put your hands together, guys.
an enriching discussion. Thank you to all our panelists for that insightful discussion.